Ready to turn your destination daydreams into reality?
I want to break
Norwegian
free.
Cruise Line's Freedom Sale is back and better than ever. For a limited time, enjoy 30% off, free open bar, free airfare, and more. Break free this summer to the Caribbean, Europe, or other amazing destinations. With our leading health and safety program, you can cruise with the ultimate freedom. Book today at ncl.com. Call your travel advisor or 1-888-NCL-CRUISE. Offer ends soon. Norwegian Cruise Line. Sail safe. Feel free. Ships registry the Bahamas and USA. Restrictions apply.
Sun's out, fun's out. Try our new Monaco cocktail, Tequila Sun Crush. A bright and bubbly mashup of tequila and delicious orange soda. It's refreshing and fruity, making it the perfect cocktail to enjoy while soaking up the summertime vibes. You can't go wrong with 2 shots in every can. That's right, 2 shots in every can. Monaco Cocktail. Find it in your favorite local store. Must be 21 plus. Drink responsibly.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the program. This morning, we're going to dive back into the financials of this whole thing, and we're going to see how, now that the FinCen Files have come to light, and now that the spotlight has been moved over to these bankers, well, now they're singing a whole different tune. Now, all of a sudden, the bankers and the regulators, well, they want more cooperation so that they can combat money laundering. I mean, better late than never, right? But where were you for all of these years leading up to this? Why does it take something like the FinCen Files or a WikiLeaks dump to make you people do the right thing? It's really not that difficult not to be a scumbag. I mean, you know. But somehow, some way, every single move these people make seems to be a scummy move. And if we're going to wait for the financial sector to self-regulate, if we're going to wait for people like Leon Black to do the right thing, we're going to be waiting for quite some time, folks. So the regulators need to step in and they need to regulate the shit out of the financial sector. I never thought I'd hear those words come out of my mouth. Like I always say, I'm not really big on regulations, right? You know, they sound good in theory, but then you have the government get involved and they screw everything up like usual. So I'm not really big, for the most part, on regulations. But when it comes to people like this, I use the analogy all the time. It's like having an unruly teenager. You know, you're like, all right, you can go do whatever you want. You have no curfew. I trust you. And then next thing you know, you're getting a call from the police about your kid drinking and driving and, all kinds of nonsense. So what do? You become more strict. You don't let them go out past a certain time. There's rules. There's a curfew. Same goes for the banking sector. Same goes for the financial sector. All of these people who have engaged in this behavior, who have worked with Jeffrey Epstein, or people like Jeffrey Epstein facilitated these financial transactions, all of these people should be held to account. But there is no mechanism for that to occur. Instead, it's about fines and it's about, next time you're going to get really penalized. But meanwhile, there's never any teeth with any of these regulations, with any of these laws, and these people continue to do whatever they want for however long they want. Meanwhile, the rest of us, well, you know the story. All right, this article is from BuzzFeed News. Headline: Bankers and regulators want more cooperation to combat money laundering. This article was authored by Anthony Cormier and Jason Leopold. Now, on its face, that sounds like a great idea, right? The bankers and regulators want more cooperation to combat money laundering. Good idea. Very good idea. Maybe you guys should start with some of these offshore shell companies. How about some sort of stringent process to look into those companies? Not the bill that we have seen recently where there's all kinds of loopholes, right? I mean, that's a good starting point, I guess. But I think there needs to be real regulation of what goes on with these offshore companies. And, don't get me wrong, not every single one of them is used for, criminal purposes, but it needs to be highly, highly, and even over-regulated. Financial industry experts called Monday for greater cooperation between bankers and law enforcement to help curtail the types of corruption and white-collar crime exposed by the FinCen Files, a global investigation by BuzzFeed News and the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Now, we know under the Trump administration and the new Apollo top dog, Jay Clayton, that white-collar crime was pretty much ignored. No, they weren't going after it. They weren't going after these Wall Street scumbags. And, these kind of people have always been sheltered from the law. But the Trump administration took it to another level with the white-collar crime. People want to get into all of the criticisms and stuff of Trump, but for me, that was one of the biggest criticisms I had. I thought that the lax way they were regulating Wall Street and these uber-rich people, it just never sat well with me because it's always a slap on the wrist, right? It's always a slap on the wrist and never real punishment. And if you don't get punished for the things you do and you don't have to face repercussions, you're going to continue to do those things. At an online conference entitled FinCen Leak, Next Steps for the Financial Industry, organized by the New York City Bar, banking executives, former regulators, and law enforcement agents said the 2020 release of the FinCen Files, an investigation into major Western banks that facilitate transactions on behalf of suspected terror organizations, narcotics traffickers, and other financial criminals, was very bad publicity for the banking industry. See, again, if it wasn't for the publicity, they would have never changed it. So don't forget that fact, right? When we're lauding them and we're cheering the fact that they want regulations now. They should have been doing this from the jump. It shouldn't have taken an investigation by the International Consortium and BuzzFeed to blow this wide open. Their own regulation department, their own people should have caught any sort of these issues and put a stop to it. But now they're saying they want more regulation. I mean, it's just, it's such a hollow statement from the financial industry, right? Why do you need more regulation? Here's an idea. Do a better job and hire people that have a little bit of integrity. But they also acknowledged that the articles, published in more than 80 countries, forced bankers, regulators, and law enforcement around the globe to reassess their approach to tracking and prosecuting financial crime. Hey, look, if it takes these sorts of articles to get these people to act, then great. But don't try and act like you're the superhero here, the financial industry, by saying, oh yeah, we want more regulations. If it wasn't for the great work by the International Consortium of Journalists and BuzzFeed, and for the FinCen Files coming out, would you people, meaning the banks and these financial institutions, would you be pining for more regulation? Would you be crowing about how things need to change? Of course not, because it's all good when you're enriching yourself. It's all good when you're making boatloads of money. But when you get your ass cheeks exposed a little bit and people take a glimpse, well, then all of a sudden it's, well, that really wasn't what we meant. I mean, we're all about the regulation. Yeah. We want to make sure everything's on the up and up. Meanwhile, for decades, they've been operating like absolute criminals. But now that it's been exposed and you're aware of it and people are taking notice, well, now it's, well, we want to change things. Cultural change, as with anything, is going to be extremely difficult, said Terry Quintana, an intelligence research analyst who reviews suspicious financial transactions for the Department of Homeland Security, Absolutely. Look, it's not an overnight process, right? I'm not living in a fantasy world where I think we're going to wake up tomorrow morning and the financial industry is going to do the right thing. I don't operate in that sort of fantasy world. What I'm saying is we need to start seeing the steps towards that occurring. These institutions need to be held responsible. That's all. That's all I'm trying to say. That's the point I'm trying to make. No more, no less than any of the rest of us. We're at a point, it seems like globally, where there is no sort of personal responsibility. Oh, my circumstances caused me to do this. Oh, Jeffrey Epstein was manipulating me to be this sick bastard with him. I'm tired of it, folks. Honestly, I am really tired of it. People need to take responsibility for their own actions. And these bankers who get off on all of these financial crimes, they're the epitome of that. She pointed out that even when law enforcement and bankers spot questionable transactions, they sometimes fail to take basic follow-up steps to share that information, making criminal activity difficult to stop. Well, what's going on? How about better training? How about you put everything that the people who are in charge of this, as far as, the people looking at these reports, give them the tools that they need. The department is very underfunded, probably not enough employees, so let's beef it up. I think that going after these money launderers is an important enough situation where we should probably hire some more regulators here, some more people that are going through these reports. If they're overloaded, well, how about we hire some more? I know, novel idea. The panelists, which included a former federal prosecutor and 2 former bank regulators, offered concrete suggestions on how to curb the flow of dirty money across the globe. That's definitely a good idea, right? You got to use the resources that are available. You got people who are former federal prosecutors, bank regulators, and I'll take it a step further. I would have former money launderers come in and speak to the panel about their operation, their former operation, how they enacted it, how they made it run, how everything was able to go smoothly. And that's what they do with hackers, right? You got places like the NSA and the FBI. They catch these hackers, or they find out about these hackers, and then they bring them into the fold. I think the same should be done here with these master money launderers who end up getting caught. Among them, clearer penalties for bank executives who knowingly facilitate money laundering, tax evasion, or other financial crimes. Absolutely the most important thing, in my opinion. It's one thing to say, all right, $150 million fine. It's not coming out of their pocket, right? They don't give a damn. So what? They're going to keep doing it until these people are truly punished for their indiscretions and for their willful negligence. Then it's going to keep occurring. Better technology to track transactions and more back and forth between the bank workers looking into suspicious customers and the law enforcement agents building potential criminal cases. Not a bad idea. A nice line of communication between the investigators and the people who are in charge of going through these reports. I mean, they should have a line directly to a case agent or whatever. We got all this money as the federal government to spend on so many ridiculous things, but when it comes to situations like this that really impact us, somehow there's always some sort of budget crunch, right? Somehow they can't find the necessary funds to do the thing the right way. The session was the latest example of how the FinCen Files has roiled the financial industry, provoking lasting impact in the U.S. and overseas. The articles, based on a trove of thousands of closely guarded Treasury Department records, expose the torrent of dirty money that the world's most powerful banks transact in plain view of government watchdogs. And it really was an eye-opening expose. I say this all the time, we all know that government officials and people involved in the bureaucracy are corrupt. We all know that they're stealing. We all know that there's all kinds of grift going on. But to have it exposed in such a manner and thrown directly in your face like this, it's hard to ignore it, right? To publish the FinCen Files, reporters on 6 continents sifted through 2,100 suspicious activity reports, known as SARS, from the U.S. Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCen. Now, we've talked at length about SARS, so I'm not going to go into them once again, but it's telling that even with just the 2,100 of them, okay, out of the millions and millions and millions and millions of them, that you can find this kind of malfeasance. And I can tell you for a fact that it is broken. The system of reporting SARS and making sure that they get to the right people from you to them, it's just absolutely a shit show. And I know that because I had to fill those SARS out when I worked in the sports book. We had to deal with all sorts of Title 31 regulations. The SARS, submitted primarily by banks and other financial institutions, detailed more than $2 trillion in suspicious transactions around the globe, linking flows of money through the huge international banks to terror groups, drug kingpins, and kleptocrats, and human traffickers. The 16-month investigation... After decades of silence, the banking industry, the lawmakers, have taken notice. There has fully been a message from Congress that they want, possibly partly in response to the FinCen Files coverage, increased punishment for Bank Secrecy Act violations, said Robert Kim, a senior legal analyst with Bloomberg Law and a former manager at the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, on Monday. He pointed in particular to the Money Laundering Act of 2020, which passed about 3 months after BuzzFeed's news and its partner organizations began publishing their reports. So again, this was all spurred on and spurred into action by these FinCen Files, by this reporting, by the International Consortium of Journalists, of Investigative Journalists, and BuzzFeed. If these guys didn't do this investigation, do you really think the regulators and the financial system would be so gung-ho about changing things and fixing things? Of course not. If they were so gung-ho about it and they really wanted to enact change, why did they have to wait? Capitol Hill wasn't the only place to take notice of the coverage. Shortly after BuzzFeed News, the ICIJ and the 108 other newsrooms around the world began publishing stories. UK lawmakers launched a formal inquiry into Britain's oversight of banks. Members of the European Parliament advocated for a stronger response across the continent, and investigations were opened to countries ranging from Thailand to Liberia. And what they found in those investigations was insane. I mean, we're talking about gold smugglers, people using crypto crazily, all sorts of money laundering, and it's global, right? From continent to continent and everywhere in between. Weeks before publication began last September, journalists working on the FinCen Files informed government leaders of their findings and requested comment. Before the stories were published, officials in the US and UK announced they would be changing anti-money laundering rules, the same rules that the FinCen Files showed were broken and ineffective. So it goes to show you, when the media is doing the right thing and performing in their function as the fourth estate, that they can actually be a force to help people. The problem is the corporate legacy media is bought and paid for, they're corrupt, and they really don't care about doing the right thing at this point. Now, there's definitely people who do care, investigative journalists, etc., etc. I'm talking about the major media corporations and the legacy media. Perhaps most significantly, the coverage gave a critical final push for Congress's passage of a groundbreaking new law that takes aim at revealing who owns shell companies. And I think this is a huge deal. I think it's a big deal that this is on the books and that Congress has passed this, because we need to make sure that there are laws on the books that are stringent, that are going to be the kind of laws that make people think twice about engaging in this behavior. among the most effective and rampant money laundering tools cited in the FinCen Files. The entities can be used to move money with a near-total anonymity, making it next to impossible for law enforcement to confirm who benefits from the transactions. So again, that's why when people talk about, well, here's my tax return, here's how much money I made, I find it laughable at best. We don't know how much money you've made because of your tax return. We know how much money that you've declared you've made. To combat the problem, the new legislation, which had bipartisan support, requires companies registered in the U.S. to disclose who owns them and who profits from them. Well, that's amazing, huh? Bipartisan support? That's a rare occurrence in Washington, D.C. these days. It's a good thing, right? I mean, I would think that we can all agree that money laundering is a terrible, horrible type of situation. But then I would think the same about human trafficking, but there's still some people who want to politicize it. So here we are. Lawmakers cited the BuzzFeed News ICIJ investigation as a trigger for reforms that had idled in Washington after many years. The BuzzFeed story makes clear we need to strengthen, reform, and update our nation's anti-money laundering laws. Senator Sherrod Brown, the top Democrat on the Senate Banking Committee, said in December, "This action is long overdue." It is, Mr. Brown. Now let's hope that you see it through. Let's hope that you see this all the way through and you make sure that these laws have teeth. Now, the Democrats are in control of all three chambers of power in Washington, D.C. right now. So there's really no excuse for Sherrod Brown not to get these sorts of regulations through. And there is no excuse for them to make them have teeth. So it's definitely put up or shut up time for Sherrod Brown. Despite all the progress among lawmakers, little will change, Quintana said Monday, until bankers and law enforcement rethink the ways that they work together. For instance, federal agents rarely provide bankers with feedback on their SARs, making it harder for the industry to improve its reporting. Bankers, for their part, can do more to make sure that law enforcement has the most useful information at its fingertips when reviewing SARs. It's a good idea. There needs to be more communication, and maybe there needs to be some sort of liaison between the two, each office and each district, or however they break it up. But there needs to be a good flow of communication and information moving between both entities if they're going to keep their ducks in a row. It's important to keep that open line of communication between anti-money laundering departments and law enforcement, said Quintana. Contacting the law enforcement officer proactively when a SAR will be filed, that's a cultural change within these institutions. There has to be some kind of cooperation so that will happen. And there really, like I said, there really needs to be. If that means a liaison between the two, whatever. Whatever it may be, they need to do it. And it's certainly not because of a lack of funds as far as the banks go. They have plenty of those, right? So now that these laws are in place, now that we have the anti-money laundering legislation passed through Congress with bipartisan support, let's see how much steel these lawmakers have in their backbone, and let's see how many of these bankers end up going to prison for their crimes. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. You can find me on... Sorry about that. I'm laughing at my dog right now. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. And as you can tell from a little bit earlier in the podcast, my dogs are hanging out with me today, and they did a little bit of barking there. So I'm laughing at one of my dogs right now as he's staring at me, wondering when I'm going to be done so that him and I can go out. So I guess I better go and tend to this crazy mutt of mine. And I will be back later on tonight, folks, and we will pick up where we left off.
Oh, I love family road trips. Wind in my ears.
Good dog.
Treats in my mouth. And peace of mind, knowing Les Schwab did our tires, brakes, and alignment. Like Les Schwab, my family's safety is my first priority. Well, that and squeaky toys.
Swing by today and get road trip ready with our always free pre-trip safety check. Les Schwab Tires, doing the right thing since 1952.
Hey California, did you hear about the Big Vaccine Incentives Program? You Call the Shot California gives $50 incentive cards for things like groceries or shopping at your favorite small business to the next 2 million Californians who begin and complete their vaccination against COVID-19. Make that vaccine appointment today at myturn.ca.gov or call 833-422-4255. Get vax for the win, people. It's a win-win for you and California. Vaccinated Californians ages 12 and up are eligible. Visit covid19.ca.gov to learn more.